They're some of the most mysterious entities in the known universe. What are the different types of shadow people? Welcome to Haunted Road Media. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. Explore with us. As we continue our Shadow Person series, exploring the secrets of the dark while unveiling a world feared by many, misunderstood by most, we're going to take a look at the different types of shadow people, which is the first part of my new book, A Walk in the Shadows. The humanoid figure type of shadow person is probably the most common type of shadow person reported, and is the first one in which I'd had an interaction. These types of entities are simply described as appearing in the shape of a person, generally a tall man, with no discernible features. Everything about these entities is black. There are no eyes to see, no nose or mouth, nor even any clothing to view. Typically, the humanoid figure just stands and stares at you, perhaps from the corner of the room, or from the end of one's bed. So having a physical interaction with one is quite out of the norm. My very first shadow person encounter was with a humanoid figure, and those that have been following here for a while are probably really familiar with this story. But for those that are new, I'm going to recount the tale anyway, just really briefly. So what happened was, I was about 8 or 9 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night, and in the corner of my room stood this shadow person. And it's depicted really well here by Adam D. Tillery, the illustrator for A Walk in the Shadows and many other Haunted Road Media books. Now, I didn't know this was a shadow person at first. I had, being 8 or 9 years old, that's not what I was thinking. I had no idea what a shadow person was. I'm thinking, there's an intruder in my room and it's going to kill me. Then it did the strangest thing. It came up to my bed, leaned over, crossed my arms across my body, and then ran off down the hall and into a closet. At that point, I ran off to my parents' bedroom and they tried to console me, tell me it was just a dream, but I was awake the whole time and this thing really did touch me. And that was just the first of many shadow people interactions I've had. The Hat Man is probably the most feared type of shadow person out of all the varying kinds of these types of supernatural entities. It is essentially a type of humanoid figure shadow person who also wears a hat, usually a fedora or sometimes a top hat. Many times, the Hat Man's entire appearance will seemingly take on a particular type of style. For instance, the shadow person wearing the fedora will often don a trench coat, while those seen wearing a top hat may also be wearing a cape. What a lot of people report with the Hat Man is the sense of fear and dread that the Hat Man is meant to terrorize people. Sometimes he's also flanked by other shadow people, usually humanoid figures. What we've come to theorize about the Hat Man is that it is a type of emotional vampire. So it comes into the room, strikes fear into its victim, and then feeds off that fear, providing it more energy. I've heard a recent account this past summer that's, of course, now included in the book, about a set of sisters where the Hat Man would come into the room and stand at the foot of the bed of the one sister. All the sisters could see this going on, but would always come up to the foot of the bed of the one. Of course, they were all terrified. Now, a common question is, do these things attach themselves to you and move on to other locations? With this particular one, when they moved out of that house, this particular Hat Man did not follow them along. So it seems that particular Hat Man was maybe assigned to that house, or maybe it was its home, and whoever happened to be living there, it would go and feed off of those people. Why it singled out the one girl, we don't know. Most commonly, shadow people are seen without eyes. Usually they are completely devoid of features. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, nothing. Everything is black. However, on occasion, some shadow people do present eyes, which are quite striking to witness since the color is heavily contrasted against the sheer blackness of the rest of the entity. The most notorious of the colored-eyed shadow people are the ones with red eyes. These are generally considered more nefarious in nature, devious entities who strike fear into the victims they oppress, much like the Hat Man. Now, I've never personally seen the entity with red eyes, but when we filmed the episode for The Haunted, the Monster in the Closet episode, That was in regards to an entity with red eyes that the adult daughter, Taliesin, had been seeing. We investigated there several times, about a half dozen times, several follow-ups. We brought Carl Johnson in, demonologist, to help cleanse that house. And she was truly experiencing something terrible. When we did the cleansing night, if those of you that remember the episode, when Taliesin came into the house, she was supposed to stay outside. She was talking at something against the wall, and Carl ended up doing a blessing over her. At that point in time, she doubled over like she got punched in the gut and fell to the floor. I caught an EVP at that moment that said, "Die." We ended up attributing this to that entity that she had been seeing with red eyes, even though we didn't actually see the red eyes at that time, but it was basically the target of our cleansing, which we did end up getting out of that house. The hooded figure is another type of shadow person that is usually considered menacing in nature, though not as menacing as the Hat Man. Yet there are a surprising number of reports in which the hooded figure has acted more benevolent in nature. Perhaps the reason so many people believe this shadow person to be evil and nefarious is because they relate the hood with the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper, if it truly exists, is not a shadow person, but a different entity entirely that is a representation of death, and is not really evil at all. When the Grim Reaper comes calling, it is just doing its job to collect souls when one's time on Earth has expired, serving as a psychopomp, a guide who helps souls find their way to the next realm. So the reason why I say it's a bit of a mix with hooded figures is because I've heard varying stories with these type of entities. I've heard of hooded figures appearing at the end of the bed and lifting people up by their ankles and levitating them off the bed. Of course, frightening the person absolutely to death. But on the other hand, I've heard of hooded figures that have, as somebody is falling down the stairs, reach out and help that person stop from falling down the stairs, or even serving as almost a type of guardian angel type, somebody that was looking over a child, and then when it came up to a doctor's appointment, the doctor kind of turned his head and the spirit that was giving him a hint as to what the real diagnosis was. Very differing stories here as to what may be going on with these hooded figures, and they may be serving different purposes depending on which hooded figure it happens to be. What I call the Black Wisp could probably account for most of the shadow people I've ever seen. These are entities that are tall, narrow, very translucent, and very fast. They almost look as if someone hit the fast forward button on someone wearing dark clothing, and the image moves so fast you could barely see it. However, it was there. The first time I ever saw one of these wisps, I was 13 years old. We had just moved from the house in Massachusetts to a new house in Ohio, and I was unpacking boxes, just taking things out, putting them away, and I kept seeing out of the corner of my eye something in the doorway of my bedroom. I'd turn and look, and it would dart away. And I kept seeing this over and over again. After this happening for several days, I ended up asking my mother if she was seeing the same thing. Now, perhaps it was because I was a little bit older at that time that she decided to go ahead and divulge to me that, yes, she had actually seen the same thing. So that made me feel pretty good. I felt affirmed there. So I started calling this thing Tom, as in Peeping Tom. And so anytime it would come around my doorway again, I'd say, "Hi, Tom," and it would take off and run away. Well, this activity only lasted for a few months, and suddenly Tom was gone. He didn't come around anymore. So I ended up chalking it up to something that was there at the house, checked us out as a family, deemed we were okay, and then just went about its business, whatever that may have been. Another significant time that I've seen this wisp was during a paranormal investigation at Johnny V's in Muskogee, Oklahoma. And this was really at the end of the investigation. The others in the group, a couple of them were up in the bar area, and then a couple of them were out in the restaurant. I was walking into the kitchen doing a last photo sweep. As I walked in, I saw this black wisp just dart right across the room, and it slammed into this flimsy metal door that heads out into the dining room. And I use this example when I talk about shadow people being interdimensional beings. I'm not going to get into all of that in this particular video, but this is really the crux of my shadow people being interdimensional beings argument, because of the fact that you heard the slam of the door, the others heard the slam of the door, but the door didn't move at all. So it was like on its plane of existence, maybe the door moved, and on ours it didn't, and the sound of it resonated between both. And I just kind of went down that rabbit hole a little bit anyway. This is really just the tip of the iceberg, and all of these entities are covered extensively in my new book, A Walk in the Shadows, as well as other Shadow People videos on this channel. I've linked the book in the description below, and if you'd like to see other videos on this channel about Shadow People, please go ahead and check out some of the other videos off to the side. I'm Mike Ricksecker. Until next time.